Well, it's like I love talking to people that are actually, doing research to kind of figure these things out and kind of pull back the curtains, so to speak, from like what's going on physiologically as we're training and like as we're trying to figure these things out. So I couldn't find um, a way for me to actually pull up the study, but I did see you had worked with other people on a study about using plyometrics with recreational runners, and that had some kind of effect on that. Can you talk about that? Did you find anything? Were there any significant results there?
Yeah, so this was when I was in grad school also. We recruited, I think it was about 24 recreational runners, and then we randomized them into two groups. One group did plyometric and explosive speed training, so short sprints, things like
Mhm.
flying 30s, for 12 weeks, one session per week. And the other group did basic core type of training,
Mhm.
crunches, that kind of stuff that runners typically are doing anyway. So they were sort of like the control group.
Okay.
Um, uh, and then both groups were training for a marathon. So um, what we found was that the plyometric training group actually uh, improved in their sprint speed, and maintained their jumping ability. Whereas the core group, when they trained for the marathon, their jumping ability actually got worse. Um,
Okay.
there were those were sort of the changes we found when we looked at uh, variables that distance runners would be more interested in, things like VO2 max, running economy, 2 mile time trial. Both groups improved, and there was no difference between the two groups in how much they changed. So, and I attribute that to kind of, these are pretty untrained individuals coming in, so
Hmm.
they got so much better. I mean, I think on average they improved uh, in the 2 mile by probably a minute and a half or 2 minutes.
Hmm.
So, any effect of that, additional 20 minutes of plyos or core was sort of lost in the
Okay.
shuffle. I did see like the faster individuals seem to benefit more from the plyo training, whereas the slower half of the group actually seem to have maybe a negative response, which if they're
Okay.
already physically overloaded, adding in another,
Yeah.
session that's going to do some damage to their muscles might have just been too much. So
Right.
I'd like to follow that up at some point with a study on, more competitive runners, um, and see what that would look like.
Where do you draw the line between the two? Because I noticed you have the competitive group and the recreational group in the scaling study as well. Like
Yeah.
and it may have been in there, but I if it was, I missed it. Where do you draw the line between recreational and competitive?
Yeah, I think for that study, I to be in the competitive group was a Boston qualifying time.
Okay,
Um, so,
so
um,
fairly competitive.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, it's definitely like you wouldn't say that's an elite runner for sure,
Right.
but it's a little bit arbitrary. But that's what I went with on that one.
Okay.
There's certainly, I mean, you know, kind of the more selective you get, the harder it is to find participants. So
Right.
for obviously just because there aren't that many people who are that fast, and then also the people who are in the top 10 in the US or something, they don't want you to mess with their training. So
Right. It's like no, I'm doing exactly what I'm doing.
you're
Leave me alone. I'm not interested.
not going to randomize them to the placebo group or something.
Yeah. With your I just lost what I was gonna say. Oh, with the plyometric study, did you have them all on like the same training schedule, or did they all have their own like randomized schedules?
For the running training or for the plyos?
So you're saying they were all training for a marathon and then doing the plyos or the core stuff on top of whatever their training was. Was their underlying training the same, or did they have difference?
Yeah, they are students in a marathon training class, so
Okay.
um, pretty much on the same schedule. Granted, some of the runs are um, prescribed by time, so
Hmm.
faster person is covering more distance. But yeah, they're doing the same training.
Okay. I was like, I spoke to another professor in exercise physiology, and he looks at stuff with the gut microbiome, but he also works with a lot of athletes because that's what he teaches. And it's always just because training can vary so much. I'm always curious, like, was that controlled for, or like, are you allowing all of these other random elements to come into your study? Since as he said, and you probably experienced, like your N number is only often 20, 30, 50 if you're lucky. Like you don't get
Yeah.
a huge sample size.
hmm Yeah, and I mean that is a challenge. But yeah, I think whenever you're looking at research, you always kind of want to look and see like, did they actually have a control group? I mean, I've
Hmm.
seen a lot of studies where um, they're comparing two different things, but they just use like two different soccer teams, that
Hmm.
are in the same league or something. Well, you know, their training might be completely different.
Right.
Uh, they might, there's all sorts of things that could uh, sort of confound the results there.
Hmm. I think it was on your Instagram. You had posted maybe just last week. You're doing like blood lactate testing or something on new people. So it seems like you've got a new study in the works.
Yeah, I have a student who got a grant this summer to basically, there's a chart online called Hill Runner. I don't know if it's .com or something, but anyway, it basically will give you equivalent speeds with different inclines. So if you run an 8-minute mile on a flat treadmill for an easy run, and you want to do some work at, you know, up to 10% incline, it gives you what pace would be equivalent to that.
Okay.
So anyway, however, um, I think my student had emailed the person and said, "Hey, where did this chart come from?" Because
Hmm.
we were trying to use it for another project, um, and the response was that it was somebody's master's research, but we don't know where it is, and so on. So, so my student got a grant to basically do a validation study. So we're having people run at, basically 5 minutes at 6 different combinations of speed and incline on a
Uh-huh.
treadmill, and taking ventilatory data, heart rate data, lactate, and perceived exertion.
Okay.
So yeah, summer fun.
So you're just trying to validate the numbers that have
Yep.
already been, proposed by somebody else.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Um, See, now I'm trying to remember what I know I've done like uphill, also on the treadmill. We've done like uphill work in the past. Do you use that with your marathoners, like to improve like running economy, or are you strictly like flatland work?
No, we definitely do some hills. I prefer to do them outside,
Hmm.
but occasionally in the winter,
Yeah, it was winter stuff on the treadmill.
uh, it's worse because you get the melting and refreezing, which makes things challenging sometimes. But yeah, we everything from like short hill sprints to longer inclines. When I was still competing, I ran Boston a few years in a row, and so I would try different things to sort of mimic the course,
Hmm.
because you've got like a lot of downhill early on. Um, so at one point, um, I had a friend who had a treadmill in his basement. I didn't have one at the time, so we propped up the back end of the treadmill on cinder blocks, and I ran downhill for like 10 miles. and and then I would do different things with the like half mile long
Okay.
hill routes. Um, at marathon effort to kind of mimic the course out there. So yeah, there's a lot you can do. I also at one point decided I was going to run the Mount Washington road race, which is a 7.5 mile race up Mount Washington. Average incline is 12%. So to train for that, we don't have anything that long for hills in Minnesota, so
Right.
mountains to practice on. So I pretty much trained on my treadmill for that, and did repeats at like 12 to 15%. And so, yeah, that's part of the fun of coaching and being an athlete, is just trying to be creative with what you do.
See, you said you put the treadmill as cinder blocks, and I always have problems with like the treadmill walking if I'm running too hard. So, how did you manage to keep the treadmill on the cinder blocks instead of like walking off it or like toppling them over?
Yeah, I think his treadmill, if I remember correctly, was on carpet, so that kind of
Oh,
stayed.
okay.
Yeah, but I could see how the bigger issue was, it was also like a pretty low ceiling, so I was kind of like, had to be far enough forward, otherwise I was going to hit my head on the ceiling.
Yeah, well, it seems like, I mean, treadmills somehow are always in the basement, and then the basement
Mhm.
has the lower clearance height,
Exactly.
so you have no way around it. Have you done, I was thinking about hills, have you done Pikes Peak Marathon?
No, I have not. I would like to do that at some point, but then I'd have to get back into better shape, I think.
Yeah, well, it's like I've had my college coach did it, and I've spoken to several people who've done it. It just seems like it would be brutal. You're going to go up half marathon uphill, and then you got to control yourself for half marathon downhill. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not, aside from going out and doing Pikes Peak, I'm not sure how else you really acclimate to that kind of race.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be tough on the quads coming down for sure.
Yeah. So I have a question I ask everybody for like this year, because I think it's kind of a universal. So I like to ask people, if you could only choose one food for recovery to eat for the rest of your life, what do you choose?
Ooh, one food for recovery. I guess I would go with strawberry banana smoothie.
That's a solid answer. I've had several people say pizza, and I'm always a little disappointed. I mean, pizza's delicious, but I'm like, really, pizza?
Yeah, I just don't. Yeah, I don't feel like pizza right after workout. I know strawberry banana smoothie is going to go down easy.
That's a solid answer, Chris. Chris, if people want to find you, see what you're doing, where can they find you online?
Uh, our website is teamusaminnesota.org, or I'm on Instagram, Coach Lundo, Twitter at Coach_Lundo, and yeah, that's about it.
I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on today, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having me.